Welcome everyone to Together We Serve TV show. We show up 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern every Friday live on e360tv.com, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. I'm excited to see we got some people coming in. I'm excited because my guest today has been on my podcast, and we actually launched our own podcast we're co-hosting. But more than that, we've become friends. And when you do business with friends, you all know this, it just makes work so much more fun. So let's bring our guest on for today. Bridget, welcome to the show.
Hi, Steve. I'm so delighted to be here. I always love spending time with you. So this is going to be magnificent.
Well, it's going to be great. Your inspired story. Your story's very inspiring. Why don't we start with that?
Sure, just lay it out there. Well, I will say this. I used to tell myself a very different story. I was growing up, I had some deep wounds from being adopted. I always thought I must not have been good enough or pretty enough or smart enough that the big people had to leave. So I unconsciously carried that around for a long time. And I thought I had to prove myself. Found myself in college, working 3 jobs, going to school, but it caught up with me. I was failing everything. Like I was a really good student, but when you're working 3 jobs, when you're trying to have a social life, when you're going to school full time, it got to be too much. And I developed ulcers and fissures in my colon, had a bunch of other things that were going on, and it just erupted. So I was walking around with sepsis and I didn't know it. I just got so sick. And the only place that I could think of going was to my mom's house. And, when you're that sick and you just want your mommy. But I was so fierily independent and I felt like I kept letting her down. So it was the last place I wanted to go. But took my last $5 that I had made from waitressing the night before and filled up gas in my truck. And then I headed down this sharp canyon, which I had no business driving, because the moment I showed up at my mom's house, dragged myself to her door, she took one look at me and immediately took me over to the doctor's office where I collapsed. And they took me in for emergency surgery where they pumped out pints and pints of sepsis from my body. So fortunately, they found that. And then I was so emaciated, they put me on what's called the subclavian. And they started feeding me all kinds of intravenous antibiotics. But we didn't know, because I'd never had it before, one of them was killing me. And they couldn't figure out why I kept spiking these really high fevers, and they'd come down for a while and it would go up again. And they were worried about brain damage. They were worried about all different kinds of things. And I heard 2 nurses outside in the corridor saying, "We better call her mom to come back because she's not going to make it until morning." And, I don't know about you, Steve, but, when you're listening to medical staff and they say you're not going to be here tomorrow, it was such a rough time. It was, having to come to this like dark night of the soul, come to Jesus moment, whatever you want to call it, where I'm not going to be around tomorrow. And I just remember being so sad because I knew I had not fulfilled the measure of my creation. I had no idea what that was. I was lost and confused, but I just knew I hadn't done it. And then I had this beautiful presence that came and filled my room with so much light, like it was blinding. And I recognized him. I knew him, and everything in the room, my body, my skin, the metal tray table, everything in the hospital room began vibrating with his love. It was the most profound, most powerful thing that I have ever. Sorry, I still get so emotional. I had just never experienced anything like that love. He didn't care how much debt I was in, what stupid mistakes I had made, my relationships being down the tube, my grades failing. He didn't care about any of that. He just loved me for me. And it completely changed my life. He told me I was being given a second chance at life. And I fell asleep for the first time, like a sound sleep, first time in days. And when I woke up and the nurse was wheeling in more of those intravenous antibiotics, and I said, "Hey, look, I can have every single one of these, but not this one." And she just looked at me like I was crazy. And I had never spoken up to an authority figure ever in my life. So it was really scary for me to do. But I said, "No, this one's killing me. I can't have it." So she went and talked to the doctor. And luckily for me, he had had other patients with near death experiences. I didn't know the term for that, but he said, "Well, um, something happened and she's still here and we can take her off this one. She's on all the rest of these. Let's see what happens." And the next day, 24 hours later, I walked out of that hospital on my own power and completely changed, completely different. The story that I was telling myself had absolutely changed. So see my little phoenix friend back there?
Yeah.
My whole life has been understanding and believing that, like the phoenix, that we can rise from our ashes, that we are not what we have experienced or who we may think we are, that there is always a new chapter that we can write. And I started working with gang kids in Denver and listening to their stories and writing their stories, especially when they were attempting to get out of their gang situation and they were becoming model students, and I would interview them and realize like the depth of hell, frankly, that they were living in, and then what happened when someone loved them enough to show them a different way. And I got to tabulate some of those stories, and Steve, I fell in love with the human soul, and I've been writing stories ever since. And my favorite thing is to coach people to write their own stories, to recognize how much power there is in that, and to rise beyond their stories into something new. It's just incredible. So you can kind of tell I'm passionate. I love my work.
Just a little bit. It still gives me chills. It's the third time I've heard your story, and I'll hear it many, many, many more times as we co-host. Um, your inspired story. See, the key I've learned from you is there's a lot of stories out there, but they're not all of them are inspirational. That's important to you. You just don't grab every story and work with it. You want to make sure transformational is another word, or transformative. I said the word right. Hey, audience, this is a winner for me. Transformative. See, you're teaching me. Talk about that because, of course, there's stories that people lie and don't tell the truth, which is a whole different realm, or illegal stories or cruel stories. Talk about what transformative or inspired means to you when you work with a story.
Okay. Well, what comes to mind right away are two stories. When my first book came out, I had a gentleman that approached me, and at the time I was a single mom, three small kids, and he's like, "You're my author. I just know you're my author," because I had written a book with TJ Leiden, and he was a former skinhead, and it was called Skinhead Confessions: From Hate to Hope. And we even had a forward from Jason Alexander on there. It's just a powerful, powerful story of transformation and change. And he's like, "You're my writer. I just know you're my writer." And he starts to tell me this, you know, something that you might see in a movie, but instead of there being any redemption or transformation at all, he was really proud of the violence, of the deaths, of the havoc, the chaos he had created. And he's like, "We'll make so much money." And I just said, I'm not your writer." And he goes, "No, I know you are." And I said, "No, obviously you didn't read this other book, but I'm not your gal. I'll refer you to other people, but I'm not your gal." And he didn't understand it. But then I had a woman that reached out and she said, "I read your book and TJ's story is so profound." And she said, "I think if somebody could take a story of such darkness and create something of hope and healing, it would be you." And then she said, "I'm Melissa Moore, and I'm the daughter of the happy face serial killer." Oh, and Steve, I was just like, "What?" And I honestly, I got on my
Wow.
knees. I got on my knees and I'm like, "What?" How do you write a transformational story? How do you write a story of hope and healing about a serial killer's daughter? And yet It is one of the most profound stories that has ever affected my life and many other people. In fact, it was made into a series on Paramount Plus this year, and or this last year in 2025. 11 or 12 years after the book had come out is crazy. But the thing of it was is, it was on Oprah, Dr. Phil, CNN, Good Morning America, all different kinds of things because of the power of that story, because of the power of Melissa overcoming. And shortly thereafter, she appears on Oprah. Oprah actually read the book. She loved the book, told us what part was her favorite. It was delicious. And but was interesting because after that, I had more than 200 people ask if I would write their life stories. It was such an honor. But I was still that single mom, running a business. I was running a trucking company. I had 3 kids at home, and I'm like, I don't know how to do all of this. And I couldn't write their stories, but I thought there has to be a way that people can create these compelling stories. And so I started, ruminating on that and created an inspired writers retreat in which people can come learn how to write their own stories and create bestsellers that have an impact 50, 60, 70 years from now. And I love that. And the second thing I realized too is that there's a lot of victim stories out there. There are people who are still on their conflict character arc, which is to rise from victim to victor. There's a lot of people who are still living in victim, like really hard things have happened and they have a tendency to stay there. But you and I both know extraordinary people, extraordinary stories where they have been through the depths of hell, but boy, have they come out on the other side. And it's not just that they've risen and become a victor, it's that now they have gifts to share and they want to help other people. And that's when I know, okay, that's a story that I personally will take. If they need a mentor or a ghostwriter, or a co-author, I will take on that one because it can create a movement. And those are my favorite.
That I'm going to put my fist up and cheer because it's so powerful. I mean, I got chills. I did not know you ran a trucking company. This is why I love doing shows and stuff and how you transform because people are pivoting all the time. A lot of entrepreneurs are listening to this or watching this, and you did a massive pivot. And I'm going to say this and correct me. You have New York bestsellers in your portfolio, correct?
Yes, I have a lot of international bestsellers, but I have one New York Times bestseller. It just happened to hit it twice. So it hit it when a
Wow.
Dateline special came out about Rebecca Musser, who was the 19th wife of 65 women and helped put Warren Jeffs behind bars for life as 20 years. So when that 2 hour special first came out, they did such a good job and it became America's #1 watch television show. So yes, we hit the New York Times. It was awesome. And then the second time was when they had a rerun of that show. They'd never done a 2 hour special before, and they'd never done a rerun of their shows, but that hit the #1 watched television program in America when that came out as well. So it was like, it was a wonderful boost, if that makes sense. And it taught me a lot about storytelling, about media, about, what's possible.
That's a bada bing right there. And audience, just because a lot of people think Amazon bestseller, and that's nice. But that's the if you look at professional sports that I do all the time, that's the minor leagues. When you hit New York Times bestseller, that's the major leagues. That is the creme de la creme, correct?
It is, but I'm also going to give a caveat.
Okay.
Is since that has happened, I have really studied publishing, traditional publishing, indie publishing, self-publishing, that kind of thing. And I have recognized that even when someone hits an Amazon #1 bestseller, there still is an amazing amount of triumph and visibility that comes with that. And if you're into business and you're into marketing, you recognize it's a visibility game, but it's one that's handled well. If you launch well, then people who would never have known you, never have read the book, never had even known that this was out there, they get to see you. So I don't poo poo that anymore. I think it's part of a really smart strategy. There are some people that have, like, Rebecca had a national story. She had something that Oprah wanted. There were, a number of amazing producers that wanted it. And, she chose Dateline for a purpose, and it really helped to push it out there. You've got to have a dang good story, and then you've got to have a way to promote it. Some people can buy it if they spend about $250 to $750,000. Most people can't afford it. So to do something like a USA Today bestseller or a national bestseller, or even better, an international #1 bestseller, if you have a team that can back you up, and you get excitement and visibility in multiple countries, like, yeah, it's business, as you know, and it's also about who can you impact with the stories. And I love what your television show is called, and I'm just going to be honesty, is that I have had doors that have opened because of there was someone that we wanted to serve with that book. So with TJ, it was the kid in junior high who's being moved by all of the forces, and mom and dad are gang members and grandma and grandpa. And he wanted to touch that kid and help him make choices to stay out of a gang, or if they're in prison, to get out. And then with Melissa, it was the daughter of another serial killer that we wrote to, and the ripples have been tremendous. That book has remained a national bestseller in multiple different countries, especially in the US. It's in a lot of therapy offices and lots of libraries. It still remains in many bookstores. Like, it has been out for a long time. And then we had the Paramount Plus. So when you write really good stories, they can stay, especially with Amazon, they can stay evergreen for a long, long time. So the most important thing is, who do I want to reach? Who do I want to serve? And it's not that you have to put people over profit, but I will say this, that's where I see miracles happen, is when you say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this book out and start affecting people's lives. And then I see people, doors open that they never even imagined. It did for me. It did for these authors, and I can see it doing for others all the time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned business, because it is a business and there's a strategy to business, there's systems, and you out there listening to write a book. It's hard to do it yourself. I know AI and people are doing all that, and that's their thing. I'm not going to get into that, but hiring somebody like you to help you craft that story, whether it's a little, medium, or a lot, that's important. Because when you have a business, you should never do it alone. You should not wear all the hats. Same with writing a book. Don't try to do all that if you want to impact more people,
Yeah.
or if money is an issue. And I always say, people ask me about writing a book. It's your business card. It's when you speak, you do a podcast, whatever, on a TV. Hey, everybody, here's my book. Maybe here's the first chapter. It is selling you and what your impact is, which is very valuable. Who should write a story? And that's a tough question.
It's not a tough question. Of course, not because of my career, but because of my passion for stories, I think everyone should write. There is so much healing and power in writing. So if you journal, if you even some, you and I work with really busy business people, but I've noticed if they even write down today's magical moments, and it's just 3 things they're grateful for that happened today: a connection with a person, a delightful thing with a spouse, something that happened with their child. It keeps the memory banks learning and growing, but it chronicles your life. It's amazing. And then also write about your hard things, because oftentimes we try to move past that, and we get triggered if we don't allow ourselves to sit in emotion for long enough to be able to look at it and heal from it. In fact, they think that's where a lot of addictions start, is people trying to numb themselves from the feeling of something that happened in the past and running from it. And so if you can learn to write your hard stuff and be the witness of not only your mistakes and your issues and those things, but also how you rose beyond it, right? How you climbed out of that hole, how you sprouted wings, how you began to serve other people with the hard part of what happened to you. Your pain becomes a promise, and the mess that you had becomes your message. Um, one of my, what a person I really love, Lisa, she says, your misery becomes your ministry. And I think there's something really beautiful to be said about that. Now, some people will come to my inspired writers retreats and they're like, well, I don't have a father as a serial killer, and I actually lived a really happy life. And I'm like, dang, that's amazing. And the world needs to hear those stories too. I think with social media and media the way it's gone, we love stories. But it's also many of us yearn for stories of connection, of tenderness, of how to do something well. And so it's awesome when you just set away the comparisons, which, as you know, is the thief of joy, and just say, if I did have something to say, what would it be? And you'll find things begin to pour out of you. So I think everybody
Beautiful.
has an extraordinary story. They just don't always know it yet. Oh.
I knew you would say that. I just wanted to, that's good because I know if people thinking about writing a book, you've really inspired them, which is your inspired story. We only got 1 or 2 minutes left. I want you to pick a mentor. I know you've had many. Why that mentor is so influential to you?
I have had many. Can I tell you two? One really fast?
Yes.
Okay. One, his name was Leo Widener, and he was a coach before coaching was cool. And he used to work with Think and Grow Rich. I'll say
Napoleon
his
Hill.
name is Napoleon Hill. He worked with Napoleon Hill, and they would have these 26-week programs, and people would go away absolutely changed, but then they would go back to their old ways pretty fast. And he's like, we got to do something different. He came up with what's called a life creed, where you visualize the life you want to have and you put it in present tense, and was so powerful. It changed my life. And
Beautiful.
I heard a quote by Mother Teresa. She said, I am the pen in the hand of a God who is writing the love letter to the world. And that's where she became my mentor too. Because I thought, oh my gosh, that's me. Definitely not Mother Teresa, but the pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. So
It's amazing. She has amazing quotes. Really,
mhm.
really deep but understandable. It's powerful. Bridget, I knew this would be an incredible show. Thank you for spending the time. Audience, down below, you can see in the ticker is some of her social media where you can connect with her. You can connect with me as well if you need to connect with her. What's your website, real quick? I don't think I have the website there.
Yourinspiredstory.com.
She's a servant's heart, makes it simple. When you make it simple, you can serve more people. Thank you again, Bridget. And every audience, thanks for watching Together We Serve. Remember, every Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern live. Jump on. If you have questions for my guest, I'd love to hear them. We do have a guest question here, but it was too late. Couldn't get it out. But if you want to come back next week, ask me a question. I've got more using Bridget's great words, transformational, transformative, inspiring stories coming to our show. We'll see everybody next week. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you then.